We've got the Major League Baseball prediction show. I am the host, Alex Naveca, for Sideline Sports Podcast, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. And of course, your source for SoCal sports. And with me today, we've got a special guest and a longtime colleague of mine, is play-by-play broadcaster from San Luis Obispo, from Cal Poly, the Mustangs himself, Chris Sylvester, also known as the voice of the Mustangs. Chris, how are you doing today? And it's an absolute pleasure to have you here on the show.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. I think we're all kind of excited here in the sports world to be getting sports back in America. You know, Major League Baseball, as you mentioned, coming up here in a couple of days, and then the NBA, their restart. The WNBA is coming back this weekend, NHL soon after that. So I think it's, as tough of a time as it is for all of us, I think it's a really bright spot here at the end of July as we get our sports back.
Absolutely, and we're starting to see that little by little. We have baseball coming up this week. We have the NBA coming about a week later, and just slowly but surely we're getting our sports back, just like you said it, Chris. But you know what? Let's go straight to the business as we bring you the prediction show, where Chris and I are going to be talking about your favorite SoCal teams, the Padres, the Angels, and the Dodgers. And we're going to talk a little bit about what and where are they going to finish this year as far as where we think they're going to finish. Feel free to share your opinions down in the comment section below. But let's start off with the San Diego Padres. Last year they finished off 70 and 92, 36 games back of the first place team of the Dodgers. And the Padres this offseason, they really made sure to address their starting pitching. They signed Greg Stamen along with Drew Pomeranz in some long-term deals. But other than that, a couple of minor league deals as well. A pretty quiet offseason, I would say, for the San Diego Padres. Chris, what did you think about these offseason transactions for the Padres?
Well, I think bringing in a guy like Tommy Pham, who has had success in both leagues, with the Cardinals and the NL, and last year, was on a Tampa Bay team that took the Astros to a fifth game in the division series. I think that's a really solid addition to their lineup. And you also look at the addition of the designated hitter now universally throughout Major League Baseball for this shortened season. And it gives a guy like Will Myers the opportunity to just focus on hitting. Obviously, he was a big name that went to the Padres as a very young player, and he was an all-star at one point earlier in his career. I think it was 2015, 2016, somewhere around there. But I think maybe the DH position for a guy like Will Myers can help other things start to open up. I'm a big fan of the Padres lineup. I mean, if you can get these guys clicking on all cylinders, I think this is going to be one of the better lineups that the National League has. I think Manny Machado entering his second year there will be a little bit more comfortable. If Fernando Tatis Jr. can stay healthy, I think that's obviously crucial for any type of success the Padres hope to have. But then you look at the starting rotation, a lot of young guys with a lot of promise. I think we all kind of latched on to Chris Paddock last year, and he kind of dominated the National League West and had a really convincing rookie season. So I think in a 60-game season, a lot of people are paying attention, and deservedly so, to the San Diego Padres, because I think that, as you saw in years past, a 60-game stretch isn't necessarily indicative of what will happen throughout the course of a 162-game season plus the postseason. Don't forget the Washington Nationals last year through 50 games. They were 19 and 31 and came back to not only make the postseason, but to win the World Series. We see a lot of teams that finish towards the bottom of the standings at the end of the year have a hot 50-game stretch to start. So I think the Padres, a team that's certainly still working towards bringing in, guys that can really solidify them as a National League contender. I think this 60-game season might speed up that process for them. With the young dudes they have, they can go hard and far for 60-plus games. So I think the Padres are definitely a team to watch in the NL this year.
Chris, I completely forgot about the acquisition of Tommy Pham. They've also even acquired Jurickson Profar as well to help them out in that second base position. But I think this Padres team is going to be a sleeper team that is very much underrated. And I think they're going to go from the bottom part of the division all the way to maybe even the third or even the second place spot. I definitely think they have a lot of opportunities, and who can forget Eric Hosmer as well. I have to say maybe the top 5 hitters of that Padres order is going to be deadly in this National League West, and even when they go to interleague matchups, it's going to be really interesting to see how these bats really fare against American League teams and how they're going to fight it out in that National League West, because I feel as though looking at the National League West, I think it's just getting better. You look at what the Diamondbacks did in the offseason. Rockies made a couple of moves. I mean, Ian Desmond being out, getting that Kemp, getting that veteran bat in that order. Of course, the Dodgers, what they did, we'll get to that later on the show as well. But I really think the Padres can really step it up and be that team to watch. And who can forget, they brought back the mustard uniforms, Chris. Those are pretty sweet.
Yeah, I think those are pretty sweet. That's a pretty sweet look. But I definitely think that the Padres have a lot of similarities to a team that Eric Hosmer won a World Series ring on. I think you look at the model that the Kansas City Royals had back in 2014 and 2015 when they went to back-to-back World Series. You look at the years leading up to that and the acquisitions that front office was able to make for that franchise. It's very similar to what San Diego has been doing for the last 3 to 4 years. And no, San Diego isn't the small market that Kansas City is, and they have a little bit more money to play with, but it's not a franchise with a rich winning history. It's a franchise that's never won a World Series before. It's a franchise that hasn't gone to the postseason in a long time. So I think they ought to be looking at this as a real opportunity. Obviously, they're serious about winning now with the managerial change they made in the offseason, bringing in Jay Stingler, a guy that is a high-energy, younger guy that's never been a major league manager before. But I think it's a great fit for that organization. And, we'll see what they can do. It's not going to be easy for them because all of their 60 games will be against, as you mentioned, an NL West that seemingly everybody except maybe the San Francisco Giants improved in the offseason. And then the American League West, where I really feel like it's up in the air. I think Houston is obviously the favorite there, but I think the A's, the team that almost won 100 games last year, certainly a threat. Seattle's gotten off to some really good starts in recent memory, and could a 60-game spurt from the Seattle Mariners maybe get them into the postseason. Texas got Corey Kluber. The Angels, of course, adding Rendon and maybe having a healthy Ohtani on the mound. So I think it's going to be tough for any team in either West Division out of either league. But if you want to look at a team that maybe didn't make the postseason last year that has a chance to do something special in 2020, it's definitely the Padres.
I like that choice, Chris. And where do you see the Padres finishing up this year?
Man, that's it is a prediction. So I'd give the Padres a wild card spot. I have a hard time thinking they're going to overtake the Dodgers. The Dodgers just seem to enter every year with a new growing chip on their shoulder, from losing the World Series in 17-18 to getting cut short last year by the eventual champion Nationals. I think the Padres are going to grab one of those 2 wild card spots, and if they win that wild card playing game, they could very easily see the Dodgers in the division series.
Now, Chris, I'm going to put you in an even tougher spot. Do you see the Padres in that 1 or that 2 spot in that wild card?
I think it's just going to be so interesting to see what the race looks like, right? Because you could have a team with 32 wins and 28 losses be a wild card team. I mean, this is probably the hardest season to predict because Major League Baseball teams build their rosters predicated around succeeding for 5+ months in the regular season and then have a little bit extra in the tank to last another month to hopefully get to the World Series and win the World Series. So, the Dodgers and the Yankees are certainly the favorites in their respective leagues, but I think the Padres, if all goes well and if they can stay healthy and execute timely hitting situations with the guys they have, especially in the top and the middle of that lineup, I think the Padres could be the top wild card team. But you also look around the National League, and my goodness, I mean, the NL Central is loaded. Cincinnati is a team that I think a lot of people have their eyes on. You can't forget the St. Louis Cardinals, who quietly were 4 wins away from a World Series appearance last year, being led by one of the great young pitchers in the game, Jack Flaherty. You look at the Cubs in that division, the Brewers in that division. That's going to be a tough division. You look in the East. You look at the defending champion Nationals, the Atlanta Braves, who had won that division last year, the Mets, who have high expectations for themselves. So it is just going to be fun to watch, especially down the stretch in the season. But don't forget that there is a trade deadline at the end of August, about a month from the end of the regular season. So it'll be interesting to see what teams that are, feeling like they're not going to be able to contend to a World Series will maybe sell off some of the expiring deals that they have. I think something that's most intriguing to me is you look at a team like the New York Mets and some of the guys they have on shorter-term deals, most notably Marcus Stroman, who was acquired last year via trade with the Toronto Blue Jays. But if the Mets aren't in contention come this short season deadline, you wonder if maybe that guy will be on the move and head to a contender, maybe even out west. So it's just going to be so interesting to see how these front offices operate, and we'll see if a team like the Padres want to go all in on this short season. And if they do, I like their chances to at least play a postseason baseball game for the first time in a while.
The Padres definitely hoping to extend their season, as you said, in quite some time. Maybe the closest was potentially 2010, when the Giants and the Padres are fighting for that final playoff spot in the National League West. Now, let's talk about a team that you're very familiar with, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. They did finish up in 4th place of the American League West. They finished up with a record of 72-90, 35 games back of the Houston Astros.
Right. So I think with them bringing in Julio Teheran and bringing in Dylan Bundy and having a healthy Shohei Ohtani back to put in that rotation definitely gives them a better opportunity, I think, than they've had the past couple of years. The concern with the Angels in this 60-game short season is the longevity and the health of some of these guys that might not be at 100% and might miss some time. And missing a week or two in a 60-game season is a huge percentage of the regular year here in 2020, being that there's only 60 games. I mean, Anthony Rendon is questionable for opening day with an oblique strain right now. Not sure if he's going to play Friday when the Angels open up in Oakland. Mike Trout has a baby that's due in early August. You wonder with the coronavirus and all the risks with that, if that's going to sideline him for a significant amount of time, even if he's only out for a week. I think that could do a lot of damage to the Angels and their hopes of getting back to the postseason for the first time in, believe it or not, 6 years. But I think the starting pitching for the Angels in a 60-game season is sufficient enough to at least grab a wild card spot. I'm a big fan of their bullpen guys like Hansel Robles, Keenan Middleton, who's coming back after undergoing Tommy John surgery a couple years ago. Todd Buttrey, a really high upside right-handed reliever who might close some games for the Angels this year. They got him from Boston a couple of years ago in the Ian Kinsler deal. So I like the way the Angels are constructed. My only concern is, Julio Teheran's going to be late because he tested positive for COVID overseas and just got to camp within the last few days. He's not going to be ready for the start of the regular season. Griffin Canning, the young rookie who pitched really well in the exhibition against the Padres last night, has dealt with some elbow issues. Obviously, Shohei Ohtani coming off Tommy John surgery as well. So it's really just going to be all about durability for this Angels team and how many games they can afford to play without guys like Mike Trout and Anthony Rendon. And right now, that's a little bit up in the air.
I believe for the Angels, they're really going to need some bench guys to step it up, take advantage of every opportunity that they're there on the field, and really just try to help out the Angels while these guys are recuperating. Like Anthony Rendon, that's a big-time bat for the order. They're going to need to see if Mike Trout's even going to play this season as well. So these are big-time moves that the Angels really need to wait and they need to see. And you know what? I just think time is on their side. And since this is a prediction show, Chris, I'm going to say I think the Angels are going to have a very rough first half of the season. But as baseball goes, it's not about how you finish. It's not about how you start. It's about how you finish. So I think the Angels are going to get it real good for their money, and I really think that second half, once they get all their guys back and they have all their ammunition, I think it's going to look pretty bright for the Angels for that second half of the season.
Yeah, and the only concern there is that the Angels, if they have too rough of an early portion of the season, I think they could switch to potentially become sellers at the trade deadline. I mean, you look at some of the guys they have that might interest some contenders. Anderson Simmons is in the final year of his deal. Julio Teheran is only on a one-year deal. Maybe the Angels trade a reliever. They have a surplus of hard-throwing pitchers at the back end of their bullpen. So it's going to be interesting to see what Billy Eppler, the GM, who's also in the final year of his contract, does. I think that his tenure with the Angels has kind of been a little bit of a roller coaster ride when you factor in that when he got there, Mike Scioscia was there, and then he hired Brad Osmus, and Osmus, a lot of folks felt like he didn't really get a fair opportunity. He only managed the club for one season, but when a guy like Joe Maddon appears and wants to be a part of your organization and has been a part of your organization in the past, I could totally understand why the ownership there for the Angels decided to make that move. So this is a big season for the future of the Angels. And if the Angels don't have a competitive 60-game stretch here, I think you could be looking at Billy Eppler on the way out and maybe some other changes being made. So I think this is a key stretch, but it's also just it's such an interesting atmosphere that will maybe never be tasked with again, playing without fans and playing a limited schedule and playing, a third of the games that you usually do or close to that. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think, to your point, it is how you finish and not necessarily how you start. But I think that if you start too poorly this year, there might be no turning back.
I think you're pretty right there and pretty on point there, Chris. With Joe Maddon, I think he's going to make the necessary moves. He already has a lot of knowledge of the game. I think he's going to manage that team very well. But final question, where do you see the Angels finishing up this year? I mean, they've got some tough competition this year. You mentioned it early on with the Astros, the A's, and the Rangers. All three teams pretty tough, and they just seem to get better every year. So where do you see the Angels in that mix?
I see the Angels definitely competing. It's hard to peg them ahead of the Astros and the A's, a couple of rosters pretty much full of guys that have won a lot more games than the Angels have in recent memory. I think Oakland is always a pesky team for the Angels to fend off. I think their starting rotation is better than the Angels. I don't think their bullpen's as good, and I think in a shortened season, I think bullpen's going to matter a little bit more than in a 162-game season. So I give the Angels the upper hand there. But it all just depends, as you mentioned, on how often are the Angels going to be able to win games with Shohei Ohtani not in the lineup when he's pitching or the day before or after he pitches. Anthony Rendon dealing with this oblique issue, and oblique issues for baseball players can keep them out multiple months. I know the Angels are hoping that Rendon's is just a day-to-day injury, and hopefully he can be in that starting lineup on Friday. And then the other question, obviously, is Mike Trout. If Mike Trout decides after, his first child is born that he wants to spend time at home and doesn't want to risk, bringing anything back to the house, I think that that could definitely impact the Angels. So it'll all depend, as we mentioned, on their durability. Can guys stay healthy and can guys perform how they're supposed to? Justin Upton is a guy that I think we often overlook. He's on a big deal with the Angels. This is a multiple-time All-Star who has some of the best raw power from the right-hand side in Major League Baseball, but he had such a poor year last year after opening up the season 2 months on the disabled list or the injured list, as they call it now. So it'll be interesting to see what he has left. And, of course, Albert Pujols. Albert Pujols, it is year 9 of the 10-year deal that he signed way back in 2011. So it'll be interesting to see what he can give to the Angels and what could very well be his second to last major league season. And I think the Angels can certainly get in one of those wild card spots. But I tell you, it's going to be mighty tough to overcome the talent and, just the winning culture that I think the Astros and the A's have implemented over the past handful of years.
Well, I still think the Angels have a lot of weapons despite Mike Trout and even Anthony Rendon not being able to play due to health issues. But I have to say that the Angels are just going to fall short of that second wild card spot just because of how tough the division is going to be, and not to mention the National League talent that they have to play against as well. So I think it's going to be a tough stretch, a tough schedule for the Angels, and I think once maybe Mike Trout makes his decision, I think that's going to change things up. But as of now, I do see the Angels in the middle of that division, right behind the Oakland A's, right there in the American League West. But Chris, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the Dodgers and the moves that they made and some of our predictions for the Dodgers, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, the source of your SoCal news.
Hi, this is Andrew Garcia, the catcher for the Cal State San Marcos Cougars, and you're watching Sideline Sports Podcast. Enjoy.
Welcome back to Sideline Sports Podcast. I'm the host, Alex Naveja, and again with me today is a special colleague of mine, Chris Sylvester, the voice of the Cal Poly Mustangs up in San Luis Obispo. First half, we were talking about how the Padres and our predictions on how far they're going to make it this year, along with the Angels and what we think and how far they're going to make it this year. So to finish things off now, we have the Dodgers. They finished off with a 106-win season in the 2019 season. They fell short to the Washington Nationals in the NLDS, but this year the Dodgers made sure to really address those bats. So that's why the Dodgers made that big deal with the Boston Red Sox to acquire Mookie Betts. David Price also got Bruce Dog Gratterall from the Minnesota Twins in exchange for Kenta Maeda. The Dodgers unfortunately lost a big arm in Hyun-Jin Ryu to the Toronto Blue Jays, but Dodgers also made some more pitching moves in signing Alex Wood along with Jimmy Nelson, who is currently on the injury list for the Dodgers. But as of now, Dodgers looking pretty good. Just looking at that order, looking at the starting rotation. Chris, what are your thoughts so far on what you've seen from the Dodgers?
I see an absolutely stacked lineup. It's hard not to peg them as the best lineup in the National League, if not Major League Baseball. I think you bring in a guy like Mookie Betts in a contract year, and who knows what the Dodgers, financial intentions are with him. I think maybe the economic issues and the owner-player feud that we kind of had before Rob Manfred implemented the 60-game season, it kind of helps the Dodgers when it comes to maybe retaining Mookie Betts beyond 2020. And obviously that's not with any type of inside knowledge, but you just look at the tendencies that this front office has had since Andrew Friedman has been making a lot of these transaction decisions. And the move to get Mookie Betts reminds me a lot of the move that brought Manny Machado to the Dodgers a couple of years ago. You do sacrifice some young, promising talent, as the Dodgers did in the Betts deal, letting go of Verdugo, who I know you're a big fan of this past offseason. But I think that Mookie Betts could potentially be a guy that's retained on a short 1 or 2 year deal before he winds up getting his big deal when hopefully the economy and Major League Baseball and the owners are in a better place. But I think Mookie for 60 games, a guy that has won and won in recent memory, and a guy that just makes the Dodgers lineup and their defense, especially in the outfield. I think Cody Bellinger, with the improvements he made to shorten up his swing in the offseason, we already saw him hit a grand slam in an exhibition game a couple of nights ago. I think he's going to just continue to get better as a hitter. His swing's going to get shorter. He's going to be striking out less. He's going to be putting the bat on the ball more. And for this Dodgers team, that I think this still has a solid rotation. I think you're going to see guys like Gonsolin and May take big steps this year as professional pitchers at the major league level. Walker Buehler is a superstar. I think he is the best pitcher in that rotation. And obviously, I think a 60-game season helps a guy like Clayton Kershaw and even helps a guy like Kenley Jansen, a couple of guys that have just had a lot of miles on those arms with all the postseason runs that the Dodgers have had over the past 6-7 years. I think this shortened season, Kershaw's may be able to maximize his strength and his energy a little bit more. And same with Kenley Jansen, who now has another nice complementary piece with him in the back end of the bullpen, bringing in Blake Trinan in the offseason. It was a great closer 2 years ago for the A's. So I really, really like what the Dodgers have done. They even brought in Jake McGee, a talented, hard-throwing left-handed reliever that the Rockies had placed on waivers a few days ago. I think the Dodgers have the perfect roster to, again, win the National League West and again, perhaps represent the National League come the World Series. But you think back to a couple of years ago, 2018, a year where the Dodgers had just a dominant second half. They had a brutal month of April and into May before they were able to finally turn it on. They can't afford to have a stretch like that. And I think that's why when it comes to predicting this season, it's really hard to feel confident in a prediction when, again, these front offices have been building these organizations and these franchises to succeed in a 162-game season, a 6-7 month season, not a 3-4 month season. So that could totally change things. We could really have a scenario where the Dodgers finish in the middle of the pack in the NL West, or the Yankees finish in the middle of the pack in the AL East. It is a wild time right now, and I think Major League Baseball has the potential to be wacky. But if it's about what's on paper and talent, I don't think there's anybody better poised in the National League to make a run at winning a World Series than the LA Dodgers.
That's pretty spot on right there, Chris. I think with this season, anything could truly happen. It just takes a bad run from any team to really get you going down on the division. So, I mean, it's up to the Dodgers to really stay consistent, and it's up to them. Yes, they have maybe the best team in the National League. I think the Nationals could still say a couple of words because they were the ones that eliminated the Dodgers. But remember, it was the Nationals that were red hot, and they had such a great run going into the playoffs, and that's what allowed the Nationals to win games. It doesn't even matter if you're a division winner or even a wild card team, but I really like that point that you brought up with, this season, yes, it's going to be wacky, and none of us should be really surprised if we see some big-time contenders in the middle of divisions. Just because of this being a 60-game season, we've never seen anything like this, and anything can really happen. So the teams that you would assume to win may not even end up winning this year. So who knows? It's a lot of questions still up in the air, which makes this season so interesting and still needs to get the proper amount of attention that it's not really receiving from people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've all kind of been waiting to dive into the X and O's of sports, because everything that pretty much any outlet has talked about over the last 3-4 months is, is it going to be safe enough to play? Is the testing going to be adequate? Which players are sitting out? Which players are not sitting out? And now that we're finally getting closer to these start dates, I think you're going to see the media and you're going to see fans shift their attention away from the obsession with the coronavirus testing and the outbreaks and whether or not it's safe to play. Because once these guys start playing, I don't expect them to stop. I think it would take a lot to have major sports in America drop everything and stop like they did a little more than 4 months ago in March when Gobert tested positive for the virus, and it seemingly shut the economy down right after that. So I think as we get closer to the start of these seasons, I think that's when you're going to hear the insiders, the analysts, the so-called experts, make their predictions and be able to kind of see what this 60-game season means for some teams that might have a shot to win that maybe didn't think they could in a 162-game season.
I think you're right there, Chris. I think all eyes should really be on these sports that are going to be playing right now, for instance, for the NBA to just stop out of nowhere when some of these teams were on a hot run, like the Lakers, the Bucks, just to name a few teams that were on hot runs, and to just stop, and then now to potentially be ice cold and come and play in a different venue, different environment, and expect to go back to your contending ways like in the NBA. It's really tough, but once these sports start coming back into action, I definitely see things going a little differently for the rest of the world, even just everybody, just to see, hey, sports is back, and that's just going to bring everybody together. But now I just want to talk about where we see the Dodgers finishing up in that National League West. I still see the Dodgers at the top of the National League West. I just don't see anybody in their division being able to take them down. I mean, the Dodgers, I know it's just an exhibition game. They scored 21 runs in the 2 exhibition games against the Diamondbacks. I know it's just an exhibition game, but that's a demonstration of what this Dodgers team is capable of, and I just don't see anybody stopping them. Again, I think a team like the Nationals, maybe even the Cardinals, the Brewers, a team in the National League Central, or even the East. I mean, that East could be pretty deadly too. I mean, look at the Braves as well. I know the Braves usually struggle against the Dodgers, but I think the Braves can even be a team that could be a hard time for the Dodgers. So as of now, I just see the Dodgers finishing up at the top of that division, and then when it comes to the playoffs, I think we're going to see some really good baseball between some of these teams like the Dodgers, Nationals. I'm still saying the Cardinals could be a contending team, maybe even a wild card team in that really tough division. But I just think when it comes to October, I think you just got to have your eyes on the Dodgers and see how everything's going to finish.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, and I think as we saw last year and as we've seen in years past, the best team doesn't necessarily always win the World Series or even make it to the World Series. I think the Dodgers were the best team in baseball last year on paper and in the regular season, but when it came down to it, they couldn't get the job done, and in large part to the managerial mishaps of, bringing Kershaw into that situation and, relying on a guy in Joe Kelly that, frankly, never really consistently figured it out last year with the Dodgers, a year after, torching them in the World Series. So I think bullpen is going to be more important in a short season than it would be in a longer season, because I think you can get away with using your bullpen a little more, being a little more liberal with your bullpen use, and these guys aren't going to get tired like they would over the course of a 162-game season. So you look at a guy like Kenley Jansen, who certainly isn't the same guy he was 3 or 4 years ago, but there is some questions out there in regards to how legitimate the eventual World Series champion will be this year. But I think once we get to the end of October, even with the shortened regular season, it's going to be an intense, postseason run for whoever does win the World Series. And I think at the end of the day, they will be recognized as World Series champions, just as every other team in Major League Baseball history has.
Well, Chris, I have to say I disagree with the whole looking at it differently if you're a champion this year or versus to a 162 season. I'll tell you what, I say we should make another episode of Sideline Sports Podcast, and we talk and have a discussion about that idea, about me still thinking that a 60-game season is still pretty important, and how you think otherwise. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to it, and I appreciate you having me on this episode.
Well, Chris, that's all the time we have left. We just thank you so much for coming on to the show. And you know what? Opening day coming up this week on Thursday.
Yes, it is, and it's been a long time coming. I think every sports fan out there is feeling a little bit better about life, no matter the circumstance this week, and it'll be real exciting to have Major League Baseball on every night through the rest of the summer.
Well, there you go, folks. We've got Major League Baseball coming at you. You guys can enjoy it from the comfort of your own home. Make sure to give a thumbs up to this video, and if you guys are enjoying this content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, because the more subscriptions that we get, we're going to bring you great guests, great content, just like our guest, Chris Sylvester. And, of course, if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. I was the host, Alex Naveja, where your source for all SoCal sports. And, of course, I'll make sure to put all of Chris Sylvester's social media handles down in the description below, so that way you guys can stay up to date with all of what's going on with him, along with his play-by-play broadcasting, and of course, all of your news for the Cal Poly Mustangs. Thank you so much for coming on again, Chris.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, everybody, make sure to stay safe. We'll see you guys around.